What you're about to see is an experiment, but less of one than it was last time we tried it. RINGKNOCKER is a group of current and former military officers that have come together for networking, shared opportunities, and mutual fire support. So there's this sitting around in a circle talking thing we do aboard ship in the wardroom after evening chow when we're too late to hit the rack and too caffeinated to sleep anyway, but too early to relieve the watch and too tired to do any actual work. That's called a bull session. And frankly, it's where a lot of a military officer's really practical learning happens. So a couple of us RINGKNOCKERs thought we'd pick a topic and try doing that on camera. It worked out okay, so we did it again. This is RINGKNOCKER Bull Session number 2, and our topic is becoming a digital nomad, living and working where and how you want. The participants in this conversation range the gamut in age and experience. Some of us are still in the Navy and are approaching separation or retirement. Some, like myself, have been out of the military long enough to reach the peak of a second career, and one of us received his commission the same year I was born. But here's what we have in common. Like most people, we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want interesting, enriching professional lives that do not require us to chain ourselves to a particular desk at a particular time and in a particular place. We want to be free. And possibly because we all grew up in a first profession where accomplishing the impossible was expected from us on a daily basis, we see absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be able to have that. The question is not if or whether, it's how. I hope you will agree that this was a super interesting conversation, certainly interesting enough to justify exploring the format more deeply, which we will do next time. Go to ringknocker.net/bull to see the lineup of upcoming sessions and recordings of previous ones. But for now, please enjoy RINGKNOCKER Bull Session number 2 on becoming a digital nomad, living and working where and how you want. So welcome to the, this is RINGKNOCKER Bull Session number 2, becoming a digital nomad, living and working how and where you want. I guess a special welcome. I think, let's see, so I see Brianna, you're new. Jim, is this your first RINGKNOCKER event?
Yes, it is.
Jim Bennett?
Yeah.
It is, and Jim McMullen too, right? So we got
Correct.
a couple of newbies. That's cool. So just fair warning, this session is going to go more or less straight to YouTube, right? So unlike the meetups, which are sort of semi-private, you know, we publish that stuff to unlisted YouTube links. These sessions, the Bull Sessions, are intended to be released to the public. Think of them as sort of a video podcast, right? So in fact, they're going to become an audio podcast once we get a few of them in the can. So, you know, don't shout out your social security number, you know. And you know, if you do wind up, you know, if there does wind up being something that you say or what have you that you just don't want out there, just let me know and I'll damp it or something on the audio, you know, so that you know, so if you do shout out your SSN, you know, only we can exploit it. Right? Okay, so let's see, real quick, a quick show of hands, I guess. Besides me, is anybody else already living on the road? Okay, all right. So I'm the guy for now. Like I said, I think we got at least one more who's gonna show up in that situation. So basically, what I just sort of as a format here, what I'd like to do is just to give a quick intro of sort of where I am and kind of how I got there, and sort of just maybe 5 minutes on what I've seen, and then I really just want to throw the floor open, and, you know, let's go around the circle. When we get to you, you know, introduce yourself, you know, give us a minute on kind of who you are and how you got here, and maybe a little bit about sort of what you're looking for with respect to location independence, right? And let's see where the conversation takes us. It's a huge topic, and, you know, there's absolutely no way we're going to cover the whole thing in 90 minutes, right? Hey, Mac, there's another one of our old guard, right? So let's do it. Okay, so my name is Jason. I'm Jason Williscroft. I'm a U.S. Naval Academy class of '95. Surface warfare officer. Was a jarhead before, and I kind of did my 5 and dive. Left the service in 2000 and have been doing sort of an engineering consultant ever since, right? So I've kind of been location independent for quite a while, in the sense that I go where my clients are, and increasingly the work has become remote, right? Long before COVID, my clients decided that they just weren't really all that interested in paying, for hotels and plane fares. And so as a consequence, in the last 5 years, much of the work that I've done, which is mostly software development for sort of institutional clients, much of the work that I've done has been remote from wherever I happen to live, right? So after going through a nasty divorce, blah, 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 it suddenly occurred to me, wait a second, why am I sitting in an air-conditioned box in Miami, or before that, Chicago, working for a client in Boston or what have you, when I could just as easily be sitting in some other air-conditioned box 12 time zones away, right? So that's basically the decision that my girlfriend and I, we were living in Miami at the time. We met a guy who, actually a retired NASA administrator, who was living part-time on Bali, the island of Bali in Indonesia, splitting his time between Bali and Chicago. And we sort of made friends with him, and guy posts a lot of cool pictures on Facebook, and the girlfriend responds, and, oh, I wish we were there. And he kept pinging us back and saying, well, my villa's available, why don't you come? And it took a year and a half, but we finally made the decision to pull the trigger. And so we, back in December, we came out here to Bali, and we've been here ever since. We went through a number of experiences that I think are pretty common to people who really hit the road for the first time, and sort of found our feet. And then COVID hit, and it's like, all right, well, why leave? It's not a bad place. And so we've been sort of doing that thing, right? So along the way, we've met a lot of people doing this, right? This digital nomad thing is really a thing. There are vast communities, at least in Asia, of people running around trying to make a living like this. And, some are succeeding, and some, frankly, are poor. So, it's good not to be that. Although being poor on Bali is probably better than being poor in a lot of other places. Right? So we've seen a lot of mistakes made, and we've made a few. And we sort of feel like we've hit our stride here, right? So things that we can talk about, and I don't want to just like blah 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 for the next 90 minutes, right? But just as a list of bullet points, things that we can talk about. So, what kind of work, right? And I bet you I see 5 people and one bold-faced name on my screen. I'm sure all 6 of you guys probably have a different slant on the sort of work that you're 7. Hey, Quincy. Hi, Quincy. How you doing? Welcome to the Bull Session.
Thank you.
Quincy's another newcomer. So Quincy, we're going to ask you to introduce yourself to us as soon as we get to you in the circle. So anyway, things we can talk about. What kind of work, right? And I've seen a number of different models out there, and some work and some don't. The traps, right? There are decisions that you can make that will not work out well. There's some patterns that I've seen that are worth calling out. What really does work? I've seen some people succeed fabulously out here. We're doing pretty well ourselves, and so there seem to be, some areas that align well with success. Best places, where to go, right? I can't tell you what the best place is, but we can talk about some of the things to think about, like what should be some main criteria to choose a place to go. What do you do when you get there? Settling in is a thing, right? That last mile is a lot more than a mile. So figuring out kind of how to settle in, and then finally, just sort of there's a grab bag of stuff, the tech, spares, how to deal with connectivity and communications and cell phones and all that. So we can talk about some really nitty gritty specific stuff that will affect sort of the way that you live and work and quality of life and all that. So having said that, why don't we just go for a quick round of introductions, right? So I've introduced myself. Why don't I just, I'll go around the circle on my screen, and when I call you, if you don't mind, just give us give us a minute or two and tell us who you are, where you came from, what you do, and kind of how your interests intersect with this topic. So Cassandra, you wanna go first?
Sure, yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, so my name's Cassandra USNA, active duty, retiring here next year, Naval Academy class of 2002, NAPS class of 98, and definitely wanting to look into being able to kind of work remotely as much as I can, just because my dad had a family business, so I definitely saw the enjoyment he had of just being able to kind of set his own schedule and stuff. My brother has had several internet businesses and does a lot of traveling, and I see the freedom that he has and able to do that and kind of working from his phone or laptop, or as long as he has an internet kind of connectivity, he can do what he needs to do. And I kind of want that freedom after 20 some odd years plus 4 years at the academy of kind of being under strict regulations and rules. I kind of want to be able to run my own schedule. So. Yep. But I was a slow jump ship to cryptology, and I've been doing cryptology probably for the last 16 years. So yeah, that's about it.
Thanks, Cassandra. How about Brianna?
Hi, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. So still active duty. I'm a Civil Engineer Corps officer, so Naval Academy 2005 grad. So I'm coming within my 5-year window to that, that retirement decision. Do you stay and keep going on, or do you find something else to do? And just we've got 4 kids. We're dual mill. We've PCS'd every single move across country or across the world, and most of our tours have only been about 2 years long. So it's a lot. In the last 5 years, I've moved 4 times. So I'm kind of looking for the freedom to do what I want to do wherever I happen to be at that moment, and maybe not move for a little bit. I've got 15 years of government contracting experience, and I'm a defense acquisition professional. So I'm actually trying to start up a consulting business to help small businesses understand kind of the set aside regulations for government contracting, and how to register with a small business association, and kind of walk them through those processes so that they're familiar and can grow their businesses and be successful in government contracts. Because in my experience, I saw a lot of them struggle. So kind of trying to set that up to help me as I get closer to that transition point, maybe have something else that would give me the flexibility and the freedoms to kind of work from home, work wherever I want, wherever I am. But that's me in a nutshell.
Excellent. Brianna, you need to mark your calendar on the 30th of July. A fella, one of our longer term members named Randy Wimmer is going to be doing he's going to be our speaker at the meetup on that Thursday. Randy is in that exact business, right? So he's a longtime government contractor, and he now helps folks who want to, young entrepreneurs who want to get into government contracting, and can help them navigate that, right? So that's you two are kindred souls, and you should definitely come and take part in that.
Nice.
Well, that's awesome, and I want to kind of put a mental bookmark in that, because the kind of business that you're talking about is one of the kinds of business that I've seen really succeed out here, right? So let's just remember that. Jim Bennett, you want to give us a minute and tell us about yourself, sir?
Sure. My name's Jim Bennett. Actually, I am class of 87. So it's been a few years. I spent 7 years on active duty, surface warfare, and combat systems. I then went to reserves and retired from the reserves in 2010 as a commander. In the civilian world, I jumped out, and somebody asked me how I got into project management. I stumbled into it. Kind of the same way we stumbled into being officers, I think, sometimes. Mm-hmm. I spent all that time since I left active duty in '94 in project management and process management, primarily in IT, for a lot of large companies, and both in mortgage, financial services, energy area. And the most recent, after being a director of a project management office, I stepped away and got caught on with Accenture Consulting. 500,000 employees worldwide for Accenture. And I'm currently working for them. I got called back in to help out an energy client that I had previously worked at. Of course, we're not supposed to publish all those, but let's just say I'm living in Orange County, California, and it's a local one. So that narrows it down a little bit. And they're some of my old friends. So yeah, good chance to go back and work with them anyway. Interestingly, the COVID thing, most of the people that were on site with the client, were flying in from our team from Portland, Seattle. I was the local, having to drive 50 miles every day. When COVID hit, we actually had to turn around and turn that utility client, with the exception of the field crews that are out there doing repairs. The entire client was virtual and working from home within 2 weeks. Yep.
And I think, this is another thing we're going to get into, that this COVID thing, I think, has been a great dress rehearsal for this kind of lifestyle, right? Because everybody's doing it now anyway.
And I tell you, every call we're on, both with teams here in the U.S. and the international calls, every single one of them, it's about that. So, I kind of gotten into now I'm working remote, obviously, wherever I can go from. And I've learned some of the electronics to it. My wife is also working remote. Probably wave any moment here. But we're now in that position, obviously. It's been a while. Our youngest, is about a little less than a year away from graduating from college. So we're about as empty nest as could be, and now have the freedom, flexibility to kind of go anywhere we want, work from anywhere we want. And our jobs happen to allow that at the moment. But
amen, brother. So why in that case, why do it from a basement in Southern California, right?
Well, actually, this is the second story, and I got good sunshine and my American flag flying out the window. So we don't do basements in California. But on that flip side, you're right. We can do it from anywhere. So that's one of the things that we've considered is where from and where's the best place, and because we do just the two of us and now a 6-month-old golden retriever, so we're often ready to go places.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. How about Quincy? Quincy, you want to give us a couple minutes and tell us about yourself?
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. Quincy Martin, Naval Academy 2003. Active duty Marine ground supply officer / FAO. I'm currently in a FAO billet out at DITRA. I think if you'd asked me back when I was torturing Brianna's class at the Academy if I thought I'd be looking at Russian nuclear reactors when I was a lieutenant colonel, I'm not sure that would have registered as a reality, but I've gotten to do some really fun things in the Marine Corps. I am here because more for the camaraderie aspect. I'm doing an MBA right now as I figure out what I'm going to do post-career. And I think the more I get exposed to, the better my decision-making will be when I, like we all say, when I decide what I want to do when I grow up. That's me.
Fair enough. Well, if you're here for the camaraderie, you should definitely come to a meetup. those are a lot of fun. All right. Let's see, Mac, I'm saving you for last because you're one of our long-term guys. Jim McMullen, can you give us a minute and tell us about yourself, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jason. Hey, first of all, good evening, everyone. I'm Naval Academy 95 along with Jason. Yeah, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Didn't get it from anybody else, so yeah. Any case, I'm still active duty. I started as a submarine officer after we graduated and then crossed over to FAO, like Quincy here, except I haven't looked at any Russian nuclear reactors. But I am in Honolulu, Hawaii, so I'm not complaining. The reason I'm interested in the digital nomad is much like Quincy, to hear from everybody else and get a sense and to think about what to do after the Navy. And kind of this exposure, as everyone's talked to the coronavirus disease pandemic, teleworking is not that bad. I'm kind of getting used to it and I like it. So that's about it for me. Thanks for hosting us, Jason.
Amen, brother. Well, Mac, you want to wrap us up with the intros?
Sure, fantastic. So Mak Kelly, I transitioned out of the Marine Corps 2 years ago, class of 2010, Naval Academy. Jim, you had mentioned your class of 87. It's always interesting meeting folks that graduated when I was born. So don't mean to dig the knife there, but you're welcome.
It's okay. I had that same problem with an employee at my last company when I tried to explain the concept of.
Got rid of them?
Well, actually, she was actually a really good employee, but she asked what the most interesting time I had in the Navy was. I tried to explain to her what PACX 89 was, which was the admirals all woke up on the wrong side of bed one time and said, "Let's exercise the war plan against the Soviets." And so I got to spend the fall of
the who?
Yeah. I got to, the entire Pacific Fleet was exercising the war plan, and we were. I'm on a frigate north. I got the Blue Nose certificate, the whole thing. We were north of the Aleutians doing underway replenishments in October. And as I pointed that out in '89, she goes, "That was 3 months before I was born." Yeah. No, I didn't fire. She's still a decent employee. So, hey, trust me, we all get there. I was there where you were.
I'm looking forward to it. And aging so gracefully as well.
Well, it beats the alternative, no kidding, right?
Yeah. And I noticed that we've got 4 active duty folks on. The fact that you're here right now is fantastic. Just my 2 cents on transitioning out, having done it, relatively recently. The MBA is going to be huge, and where you get that might matter for you depending on where you want to work and what you want to do. Second thing is, don't look for your first job. Look for your first job and then your backup job and then your backup job. We get really, really, really used to job security in the military. And I unfortunately was the benefactor of a merger. So big fish purchases the small fish, but about 6 months before the small fish gets consumed, they want to make their EBITDA look a little better, so they fire about 10 to 15 high-income earners, and they end up getting paid a couple $1 million more because of it. So just keep that in mind. You could be a fantastic employee, but sometimes a business is a business, and they're there to make money, not make people happy. But the reason I'm here is I never in my life would have thought that I'd be working from home for 3 months straight. And my organization, I work for USI Insurance Services. It's the largest independent commercial brokerage in the country. It's certainly not a 500,000 person company, but we're about a $2 billion and change organization. I'm going to be working from home until September, October, November. And they've already come out and said mid-September at the soonest. So I'm here to learn. I'm here to get best practices on how to stay on top of the ball. I know that my schedule has changed quite a bit since being a stay-at-home nomad. And, we certainly have some best practices that, we can tie in from the military into being a nomad and working remotely that I have, put into practice. That deployment schedule, it's like you're an 8-year-old again. And if you don't operate according to your schedule, it really, really throws you off, and it can have an impact long term if you let yourself get out of those good habits. But yeah, I'm here to learn. I'm excited, to hear what everyone has to say, and especially those that maybe have experienced this a little bit more.
Awesome, thanks, Mac. And that's an interesting sort of place to poke at too, because there are really it's a large topic, right? So a couple of major subject areas, right? One is sort of the big stuff. How do we choose a place, and the preparations and all that. But then there's the stuff that Mac was talking about, which is really the nitty gritty stuff, like how many spares should I have, and local cell versus, T-Mobile from the States, and that kind of thing. The really sort of nitty gritty technical stuff. How do I manage my schedule when I'm 12 time zones away? And as with most things, hey Guy, there's our other digital nomad. Those best practices matter too, right? I mean, both for quality of life and frankly, how well you do your job. So I think both are worth poking at, and I mean, just full transparency. I'm looking forward to more of these things, right? And so one of the things that I'm doing here is taking sort of a mental inventory. Like, all right, well, what sorts of topics are just too big to even try to tackle today, but maybe fodder for a follow-on session. Guy, we just went through a round of intros. If you did your whole one, I think it would take about an hour and a half, all on its own. I just read your bio, but can you give us a 2-minute intro? Tell us a bit about yourself, sir.
Yep, I joined the Sea Scouts in 1958. I joined the Navy in 1965. That was years of the draft in those days, and I thought I'd be cool and join the reserves and then come on active duty after I graduated. But Vietnam intervened and I got pulled out of college with 1 semester still to go. So I spent 4 years almost enlisted. And then during that time, I ended up working with some intelligence guys. Then I met some crippies. They said, you ought to join us. We do secret things on submarines and airplanes. And I said, where do I sign up? So I spent the next 19 years as a crippie. And I served in combat on 3 cruisers, 2 submarines, both of which combat damaged on board, and 6 different reconnaissance airplanes before I became a space ops guy. And
you picked up a commission there at some point, right?
Yeah, I did. As I say, I've not quite 4 years enlisted. Then I had 19 years as an officer.
This guy.
And I had captain wired, but somebody offered to pay me as a vice admiral if I'd get out, and so I did. Got out just before the 06 board met. But
so Guy joined, or Guy sent me a sort of a PowerPoint summary of his book, and we're Guy, just so you know, you're gonna be sitting in the speaker chair at one of our meetups eventually, because the guys have got to hear your story. I went through his PowerPoint; it's about 60 pages long, and it reads like a novel. So, Guy, welcome. Oh yeah. Guy, did I understand? Are you in Lima or Peru or someplace right now?
I am on the water. I bought a house here 10 years ago that was being built. It's right on the Pacific. It's spectacular.
All right, so Guy is one of our other 2, forgive me, guys, who's also managed to pull this thing off, right? So, Guy, you and I, we're gonna tag team a little bit, as the rest of the folks have questions about how to go about cutting the cord, so to speak.
Yeah.
But so you were actually the last of our intros. We just sort of went around the circle. And I had just sort of laid out a menu of topics, and I thought I'd pick one just to sort of get the conversation going, which is in terms of remote work, in terms of the sorts of things that people actually do out here for a living. What sorts of things actually seem to work? What have I seen, right? So if I may, I'm gonna go on for about 3 minutes and just sort of give you a laundry list of the kinds of things that I've seen, and let's see if this stuff resonates with you guys, right? So one thing that I see a lot of, probably far too much of, is coaching, right? I see a lot of people out here. Many of them are quite young, right? Who've decided that now that they're living on Bali, they want to become a life coach. It seems to be a phase that the kids go through here. Although, intermixed amongst them, I actually have seen a few people who, they do that for a living, right? So, from the ring knocker perspective, the Gary Slymans, he's one of our long-term guys, a long-term professional coach who can just as well do it on a screen as individually. And those guys who already have established businesses seem to do really well out here, because they're doing more or less the same thing that they had done maybe in person, right? Another big group of people that I see out here is what I would call remote tech work. So I fall into that category. I'm a software developer. I run software teams. I can write my code anywhere, right? And having a meeting on Teams or Zoom is actually a bit more efficient than having a meeting in a room in person. So So for me and guys like me, we're more or less doing exactly the same thing that we would have been doing anyway. Jim, like in your case, right? You're literally having the same meetings with the same people, just, you know, remotely, right? So that's a category of work that works really well here because it works really well anywhere. And that's the thing. Another thing that I see a great deal of, and again, maybe too much, is social media, right? Now, that can mean a couple of different things. On the one hand, you got the guys who make the cool drone videos, you know, the YouTube, the YouTubers, right? Who have created some content channel and they want to, you know, give you tips on how to live better and by the way, sell you, you know, mushroom tea on their YouTube channel. And there are, I think within a stone's throw of where I'm sitting right now, about 600 people who are all doing exactly that. And with the available technology now, you know, you can really produce some amazing content that is incredibly similar to all the amazing content produced by all the other people around you. And I would call that a trap, actually, right? So a lot of folks doing some really beautiful stuff who just, you know, are repeating other beautiful things done by other people and not really getting very far. So that's, you know, that's one big social media play. Another big social media play really falls into the remote tech category, and these are folks who manage social media advertising and that sort of thing, right? So they're really sort of in the tech and project management space, and they seem to do fairly well because they have actual clients with actual money and they do actual things, right? So there's that. Another group of people who I see, I won't say a lot of out here because there aren't a lot of them anywhere, but the proportion is much higher here, are the creatives, right? So a guy who's writing a book, a guy who's making a documentary, you know, that sort of thing, right? So folks who are out doing something that may be a solitary practice, but, you know, could be practiced anywhere, and need time and space in order to complete that work. You know, a lot of those folks are out here doing that. And again, you know, that seems to succeed about as well as it would succeed anywhere, given that the activity hasn't really changed so much as the location, right? So, I mean, if I were to try to distill a theme from that, I would say that the kinds of work that succeed really well remotely are the kinds of work that succeed really well anywhere, right? And the challenge isn't so much to find that perfect sort of thing that you want to do that's just going to be amazing and let you do it on Bali, so much as to establish a good business, a solid business with clients who have money who can pay you, right? And then once having done so, to solve the problem of, okay, how do I carve away the bits that require me to be in one place? That make sense? So that's a set of observations, and I'm interested to hear your comments on that. And if you've got any other ideas, Guy in particular, how does that resonate with you, sir? I think you're on mute.
I did that so I wouldn't cough in your ear. Okay, I'm a little different. I retired. I retired from 4 jobs. Mm-hmm. I retired from the Navy. I retired from Johns Hopkins University, took early retirement from there, go to work for the federal government. Then I retired from the federal government. And now I get Social Security. So I came here and my wife and I, and my wife and I, in the last 12 years that we were, that I was working for the government, actually I started at Hopkins. We bought a Victorian mansion and converted it into a bed and breakfast. And so we run that 8 months out of the year in the United States. And then we come here for four months out of the year to spend time with her, her family. And we actually built a house with a place for her, a little apartment for her mother, who was 91 and still spry and with it. I hope I'm not that aware when I'm that age too. I'm not all that far from it, actually. I'm coming up on 80 years old. So, but I'm when I saw this, I thought that was pretty interesting. So,
Guy, that actually reminds me, speaking of passive income and sort of how people can leverage that, about a quarter mile from me right here on Bisma Street in Ubud in Bali, there's a restaurant up on this little cobblestone street, and the name of the restaurant is Nick's Pension.
okay, I understand that.
Right? Yeah. So we see that. We definitely see, you've got a passive income. Laura Hatcher, who's a photographer who's on the regular meetups, has talked about this when she talks about entrepreneurship, the advantage of having, in her case, a retirement, right? That serves as a foundation for financing, in her case, a photography business, but in the general case, whatever the hell you want to do, right?
Yeah.
And that's a huge advantage. And after an investment of 20 or in your case 90 years in the service,
42.
It's a good payoff. Fair enough.
Actually, I served 23 with the Navy, 8 years with the Air Force in research, 9 years with the Coast Guard.
Holy cow! Right.
Yeah, it comes out to 42 years.
That is a chunk of change.
I was the chief scientist of the United States for maritime awareness. How many here have heard of the concept maritime domain awareness? Anybody?
I read your PowerPoint.
Okay. Well, yeah, okay.
Oh, she's another Crippy.
Oh, there you go. All right. Well,
there you go.
So that's why she's heard about it. Although it's known all over the world. At my retirement 8 years ago, I had 18 nations show up to say goodbye. I was really flattered by that. So, and the other thing that I still make some residuals off of is that I invented a satellite. I invented a satellite to track ships in a new and totally different way. Have you ever heard of satellite AIS? Anybody here ever heard of satellite AIS? You probably have. You're looking at the person that invented it. I was told that I was crazy, that it would never work. That's in my book. But I knew in those days you couldn't admit that you were an ex-NSA person, and I had worked on some signal processing problems in NSA. I couldn't write the math, but I could understand the math after it was written, and I was beer drinking buddies with the guys that could. And so I went and asked them, hey guys, this is what I want to do. Isolate this signal at this frequency, this power. And they said, piece of cake, you pay me and I'll do it. And I kept telling people, I can do it. That's the conclusion. You're crazy, it'll never work. Well, it does work. And now,
there you go.
But so I'm a little different, you guys. I was a little surprised all you guys are so young. I figured it'd be a bunch of graybeards like me. But geez, if I can help you in any way, talk about this stuff. I've lived overseas now off and on for many years. I spent 7 years in Japan too. Nihongo wa wakarimasuka?
It's been a long time. So, Guy, certainly one way that you're going to be able to help the group a great deal is sort of achieving an understanding of how, because I raise your hand if you're planning or if you already have retired from the service, if you're on the retirement glide path. I know, Cassandra, you're headed there. Jim, right? So, this is something that many of us are, I don't have this, but many of us will, is that sort of that underpinning that gives us the ability to finance, whatever it is that we're doing next. And of course, one of the advantages, and this is really significant, right? So if you choose the location correctly, one of the advantages of going remote is that it gives you, let's call it a geographic arbitrage if you're a trader, right? So it gives you the ability to trade location for time, right? So just as an example, out here on Bali, we've got they call them villas. It's basically an apartment, nice 1-bedroom apartment, pool and daily cleaning and all that kind of thing. And it costs about $500 a month, right? So, you add it all up, and a lifestyle, a comfortable lifestyle that might run you, somewhere between, $5,000 and $10,000 a month in the States will run you, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a month in some remote location. And so what does that do for you? Well, it gives you the ability to stretch your time, right? So if there's an idea that you're developing, if there's a business that you want to launch, if there's some sort of a thing that you're working on that is going to need some time to germinate and develop, well, that's how you do it. It's precisely what I'm doing, right? So I'll go and take up a contract and work, remotely full time for 6 months and sort of fill up the coffers, and then I'll have a long runway to work on things like RINGKNOCKER, for example. Other things where I know I'm going to be able to, or I'm going to need to devote some time and energy to it, and going to want to be able to focus on it, right? So this gives me the runway that I need.
Let me ask if anybody here has heard of the book, the website. It used to be called International Living. It's a company, I think, based in Baltimore. You might look it up. I subscribed to that for several years. Yeah, I've been married to this Peruvian lady now for 25, and with her anyway for 25, married for 23. And we were talking about this. So I subscribed to that for 4, 5, 6 years, and I still occasionally see it, notices ads for it. But it's a great source, including what you're talking about. What kind of employment? They suggest being a freelance writer and writing what you know about. Yeah, that's what. And the other thing, of course, is consulting, and that's what I still do. This time last year, until April, a year ago now, I worked for 4 years with the Department of Homeland Security, and once a month I flew back to meetings, but the rest of the time I was on a computer writing stuff for them.
And that points up one of the traps that I've seen out here that's probably worth calling out. So there are a number of folks who they get inspired, right? So they put away some money, they come out and they sort of start their travel experience, and they meet a lot of people and they do some yoga, right? And they get inspired by the lifestyle, and so they want to tell people about it. They want to write about it. They want to, a lot of them decide to become at that point either life coaches or freelance writers, right? And so what happens, and this is again, I think that the same sorts of business considerations that apply, sitting in Milwaukee apply here, right? You don't just need clients, you need clients with money, right? And so the person who's decided to become a freelance writer and write articles to tell other digital nomads how to be digital nomads really needs to take into account the fact that the vast majority of digital nomads aren't making a lot of money, right? So it's interesting and it's fun and creative, but what it's not is lucrative, right? And so I think that this is actually one of the main traps that I've seen folks come out here and fall into, is that they'll take up lines of business that feed their souls, but they don't feed their stomachs, and that's, you can get a lot farther. The same thing that I was talking about a minute ago, this idea of stretching your runway, it works for that too, right? So if you can make a little bit of money doing that, it'll carry you, farther than it might have carried you in the States, but it is still, it's a significant limitation, right? So I think that, that having an idea, some idea, before you jump, of how you're gonna sustain yourself is really key. Even if the answer to that question is savings, right? Like I've got enough savings. I've worked the numbers, and I can hang on Bali or Sri Lanka for 2 years. Okay, fine. 2 years is probably enough time to come up with the next thing. But knowing the answer to that question, that's key.
As we've been talking, you had mentioned, having an established practice, whether that's consultancy or something else, and then taking your headquarters or your home office to a remote location might make more sense for folks. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, being a personal financial planner, for example, spending your first 5-10 years in the States, building a book of business, doing what you got to do. From that point, you can build off of your relationships from really anywhere. You can handle any meetings that need to be had virtually. as far as gaining access to additional clientele. That's a one-on-one environment where you can coach someone through video. I'm thinking about what I do, being an insurance broker. I'm not sure how it would necessarily work as far as being a commercial insurance broker is concerned. A lot of commercial clients, they want to see you. But I have, when I first got out of the Marine Corps, I was working in Pittsburgh, but 100% of the sales that I made were in the Southeast, and I never saw one of those clients. So, I'm thinking about, $100,000 in organizational revenue. My first year, it kind of like the thing about insurance is that you're creating an annuity for yourself. So if I did $100,000 in revenue for 5 years and I was making a 25% commission off of that, that's $125K that I could live off of while forever in perpetuity, as long as I maintain those clients. But that doesn't necessarily say that I'm not going to continue doing that. So you go over there with $125K and an annuity.
You're going to be very comfortable. Yeah.
You keep writing business from the comfort of a different home. Your work hours, of course, are going to have to be a lot different.
So let me poke at something there, Mac. There's a metaphor that I've been using a lot lately. When Michelangelo created David, the sculpture David, right? He was asked, how'd you do that? And his answer was, well, I started with a block of marble and then I chipped away everything that wasn't David, right? It's this notion of making something through the act of subtraction, right? And I've heard asserted by folks whose opinions I respect that is in fact the way that most significant things get done. And here I think it's a great metaphor, right? Because when we think about what makes a great remote business, what makes a great business to operate from an island someplace, right? Well, the real question that you want to ask is, what makes a great business, right? Once you know what that means within whatever context you've got, then you can start chipping away at it and say, okay, well, which parts of this great business don't work remotely? And what would the business like if I took that part away? What could I trade for it, right? So sometimes what you trade is flexibility, right? So for example, here I've got a client in Boston, right? So my work day starts at 9 p.m. my time. So that's a bit of a scheduling constraint, right? And it's something I have to give up, right? My evenings are somewhat spoken for during the week, but in return, I get I get to live here. Another thing that you might give away is income, right? So it may be by giving up, and Mac, you could speak to this. The commercial clients who just have to see your face in person, maybe by giving those up, I'm giving up some revenue, but the revenue that remains is more than maybe I'm at 75K instead of 125K, but the revenue that remains is more than sufficient to sustain me where I've decided to park my butt, right? So again, there's a trade-off there, but you can't, as an engineer, right? I can't do trade-offs until I've built something to trade off from, right? So that question of what's a great business model, period, and then what can I carve away from it in order to make it sustainably remote? I think that's a great way to think about it. What do you guys think?
Makes it more manageable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'd also add, when you look at it, one of the books that I read years back was The 4-Hour Work Week. And I'll tell you, that book kind of changed my whole mindset with regard to cleaning my house. When I had to compare the hourly rate I would charge myself, based on, what my daily activity is compared to the hourly rate you can go out commercially and shop for some of those services and get that help to free up your own time, right, to do some of the other things, as well as what you mentioned, kind of the value of your money where you're located, right? So if your cost of living is lower, you're definitely, you could have a slightly lower pay. You could stretch things a little bit farther to give yourself more in between time. And I like kind of having that model and then chipping away. And when I think chipping away, I kind of think of, okay, what can I set up that would be automated, right? That I wouldn't necessarily have to spend a lot of time on directly, but that would also contribute to the overall business and what I'm trying to do in the management of that. And the only other thing I would add is just, you got to make sure it's something you enjoy doing, especially, with you working late nights. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, after a while, you're going to get worn out. You're going to get burnt out doing that. So I think that's a key part to any business model is just, do you have a passion for whatever it is that you're trying to get into? I mentioned kind of the consulting thing and the small business thing. And I have a passion for that because I saw businesses struggle, and it tore me apart that they were struggling so much executing these government contracts. And I was like, what, I could help. I could help give them advice. I could help them just set up processes that would allow them to be effective and efficient. And that's kind of my why. That's what drove me, is how can I be helpful to them so they can do an awesome job? And so I think if you can find that and find something you really love, you'll be able to be successful no matter where you set up or how you set it up.
I mean, I don't disagree with that at all. And I'm sure you can imagine there are a lot of Tim Ferriss fans out here. 4-hour work week's kind of it's certainly a Bible sitting on many people's desks out here, to the extent that we have desks. You mentioned a couple of points there worth poking at, right? One is to do with picking something that you enjoy. I mean, that is for me, and everybody has their own sort of reasoning, right? But for me, the reason why this works so well is that it gives me the freedom to experiment, right? So whereas, back in the States, working a full-time job and then trying to start a business on the side, there would be a limit to how many different things I could try, and particularly simultaneously, right? Well, here with a longer runway, I can spend less hours on the thing that's paying the bills, and so as a consequence, I can try 2 things at once. Instead of just doing a meetup, I can do a meetup and a bull session. That kind of a thing, right? So, again, with trade-offs, right? You're trading you're trading something for something else, and at the end of it, you're looking for a lifestyle that you like, right? I mean, it especially. And you guys with the gray hair, I'm sure, are with me on this. You come to a point where you're like, wait, what the hell am I doing this? This ought to be more fun, and maybe I should arrange my life so that it is. I don't think you can really start too soon on that. Let's poke at a couple of other, or at least one other thing, Brianna, that you mentioned was the question of automation, right? So the farther away from home you get, the more important that becomes, right? Because you very quickly get to a point where you just no longer have the capacity to, go bang on somebody's door when it's not working. You can't just pick up the phone and call somebody because it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You can't go visually inspect things, right? So as a consequence, one of the really key elements out here is to take things that we all have, pots on the back burner back in the States or what have you, right? Take things that that might normally require personal attention, and as you say, figure out how to automate them. Maybe that means technical automation, or maybe that means outsourcing them to somebody who can keep an eye on them on your behalf. A good example, my girlfriend owns and she's out here with me. She owns a couple of condos in Miami, right? And they're out for rent. So what she's done is traded cash for eyeballs, right? So she pays somebody to go take a look at those places, somebody who's not her tenant, and validate that things are working as expected in order to give her a certain peace of mind. Does it reduce her income from the places? Yes. But it basically gives her eyeballs wings, right? And gives her the ability to oversee, properties that otherwise would require her personal intervention, right? Best to take that kind of thing into account ahead of time, because if you're going to rely on that income on the road, there's going to be less of it, right? So that kind of thing is for sure worth thinking about. Let's talk about a couple of other kind of let's call them traps and opportunities. Okay. So here's another business model that that seems really attractive, and some people make this work, but it's kind of a great example of both, right? So I live in Ubud. It's in sort of the middle of Bali, and it's kind of an art town, right? So there are these little villages all over the place, and each one has its own little cottage industry, and they make chairs shaped like hands and big giant teak tables and stone sculptures that weigh 2,000 pounds, like anything you could possibly imagine. They make little heart-shaped wooden bowls, right? And then those things get, they get exported all over the world, and you buy them in Pier 1 imports and that kind of thing, right? So folks will come here and they'll see all that really great stuff, and they'll go, oh my God, I got to sell this back in the States. So they set up an Instagram page and a Amazon shop and all that, and they build themselves an infrastructure and a shop. And then they discover that the Indonesian government is going to charge them a 50% tariff on everything that they export, and that you can buy a teak tabletop here, a 600-pound teak tabletop for $150, but it's going to cost you $1,200 to ship it to the States, right? And all of a sudden, what seemed like just a slam dunk, forehead slapping, oh my God, no shit business model becomes an absolute disaster, right? So there is a real world out there, and that's, you get enthusiastic, right? You come like, oh, holy cow, I can't believe nobody's doing this. And, so on one hand, sometimes you're right. Sometimes, the truth is that you're seeing something that for whatever reason, somebody else hasn't seen or tried to do yet. And you're going to make a lot of money, right? But it's worth checking, because sometimes people aren't doing it for a reason. Right. And many times those reasons are sadly sort of, government in nature. It's a tariff, it's a tax, it's a whatever. But they're not practical because they're not practical. Right. So that's a real pitfall that folks can fall into. And it's really useful to have somebody on the ground. And Guy, I bet you've seen this, going back and forth to Peru, where, you see that arbitrage, right? Where, gosh, I could take this thing from over here and sell it over there, and right. But in practice, it's just not practical.
I was old enough when I got married. I was 53 years old that we came here to get married in front of my wife's family. I started looking at that sort of stuff, and I did my due diligence, is what it's called in the business world, and said, well, this looks like, as you just said, really easy to do. It's going to make a lot of money. No, by the time you pay all the taxes and all the shipping, and that's the two big things that kick you right in the butt. I said, well, that's not worth my time. And so we didn't do it. Yeah. But we sure looked at that. That's been 20 plus years ago now.
If you've got an eye for that kind of thing, I'll tell you that the people who I've seen really succeed at that are the people who do the big ticket items, right? So if you want to sell like heart-shaped wooden bowls at $1.50 a piece, transaction costs are going to crush you. On the other hand, I can go down the street here and buy a hand-carved sculpture of a dog for, a couple of grand, and then probably turn around and sell it in the States for significantly more than that. And in that case, because the per item price is very high and the quantity of things to ship is very low, and right, in that case, I would say that the calculus would probably work out better. But you got to have a sufficiently sharp eye to be able to pick those things, which I certainly don't.
Yeah.
There's a flip side to this, right? I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but so the U.S. tax code has a giant loophole for expats, right? So basically, it goes like this: if during the course of any contiguous year, not calendar year, but any sort of 365-day period, if the source of my income and my body are both outside the United States for, I want to say, 80% or 90% of that time, then I am exempt from something like 105 or 103 or something slightly less than $110,000 of worldwide income, right? Meaning I don't have to pay U.S. taxes on that worldwide income. You just have to be out of the country long enough for that to take effect, which is awesome, unless your clients are inside the United States, right? So on the one hand, if you can manage it, if you can, set up a corporation in Estonia or in some way work it out so that the people you serve are paying an entity that's not physically located in the United States, then you can quickly get yourself into a point where you're getting a, depending on your tax bracket, 20-30% premium on what you're making. The flip side to that is that if your clients are inside the United States and if your bank is in the United States, then as far as the IRS is concerned, your butt's in the United States too, and none of that works, right? So that's a business decision that is worth thinking about as you're sort of planning to come out here. In my case, didn't work. All my clients are in the States. There's no way really for that piece of my business that I can get away from that. But I know a lot of people who are in a different place, right? And we're again with the coaches, the language instructors, that sort of thing, where they make their money outside the United States. A lot of what they make is in cash, right? And in that case, the tax advantages can be absolutely huge. When you guys think about where would you like to be, right? I mean, obviously, Guy, you're married to Peru, right? But I mean, what places in the world are we thinking about here?
We did a family trip to Costa Rica after I got back from my last deployment. We spent 2 weeks there in the inland area near the Arenal volcano. It was just gorgeous, beautiful, calm, not overly crowded. I could have stayed there forever.
Yeah, Costa Rica. The diving there is amazing. And, from a business perspective, you got something going on there that's a huge advantage if it matters to you, and that's the time zone, right? One of the real challenges that I face out here in Indonesia is I'm literally 12 hours away from my client, right? So that is an extremely it's just something to deal with, right? So if you're in a business where you need to have a lot of FaceTime during the course of the day with your clients, then nearshoring is a big deal, right? And Central and South America are definitely strong places to look. Who else?
I looked at going to Ireland.
Ireland?
Ireland.
Right.
Yeah. Dublin or down in Cork.
From a tech perspective, Ireland really works, right? Because it's actually a strong outsourcing location for a lot of U.S. tech companies. There's a great deal of talent there. So, one of the things that a lot of folks will wind up doing is finding local outsourcing, right? So, let's say that I'm running, say, a web design consultancy, right? So I'm doing a lot of WordPress work. Well, I'm going to find a number of folks. It's the Upwork effect, right? So normally I might go on Upwork or, some sort of an outsourcing thing like that, which, by the way, Brianna, speaking of automation, right? Like that has been a major resource for us is Upwork. You're just finding people to do things for us. But, you pay a premium when you work through an intermediary like Upwork. And the thing is that a lot of the people who you're going to find on Upwork are going to be located in the place where you want to go be a digital nomad anyway, right? So you can even if you make a connection on a platform like Upwork, you can then turn around and make a direct connection locally to get the same kind of work done, without paying that premium, and that can be a huge advantage, right? So if what you want to do is, let's say, specifically technical along a certain line, right? Then that can definitely be a consideration in terms of where do you go. Like I want to pick a place where that kind of talent is readily available. So Guy, in your case, Ireland would be actually a strong pick for me because of the local software development talent.
Jason, you mentioned, where do we want to go? Where can we see ourselves going? And I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm not sure I would ever really want to be anywhere out of the States for that much time. But what I would really like to do is put myself in a position where I could disconnect for a month or two at a time on a backpacking trip or a sailing trip or just a cultural immersion trip, just in different places around the world. Like to consider myself an avid backpacker, not so much anymore, but getting to a place where that's possible would be fantastic. But I think that, like you said, it kind of comes down to that subtraction game, where how can I create a future for myself where doing this is a possibility? And you were talking about outsourcing some of that work, and I think that some of that could actually be being part of a larger team or running a team that can make decisions in your absence or assist with clients in your absence, things like that. I'm not sure.
Well, Mac, there are a couple of really interesting things I think we're sort of poking at there, right? So one has to do with the nature of unplugging. All right. I remember a couple of years ago, I went on a ski trip to Vail with a buddy of mine, and I hadn't had a vacation in a while, and neither had he, and and we're sitting on a ski lift in Vail in January, and it's amazing, and I'm on my phone, tap tap tap, and at some point he's like, "What are you doing?" Are you here to ski or are you here to work? And that's the thing, right? I mean, I think at some point we do have to decide, right? I am in Bali, as beautiful as it is, with all the waterfalls and the temples, and I'm here to work, right? And so I organize my time around not needless productivity, but I organize my time around furthering my interests, my primary interests, which are business related, and then I do stuff on weekends, climb volcanoes, whatever, as I can, right? There are others who will come here ostensibly to do business, and every other weekday they're off swimming under a waterfall or something, and I'm sure it's a lot of fun and it looks great on their Instagram, but those are the poor digital nomads, right? So I'm with you, man. I mean, I think that being able to unplug and do that sort of thing is awesome, but it's not business. What that is, and I think this goes to your second point, what that is the consequence of having constructed a solid business. Because when you've constructed a solid business and have a team and all the rest of it, then you can step away and do that kind of thing, right? So here's another thing. And again, Brianna, to your point about automation, there came a point where I had to decide, am I a software developer or do I run a software business, right? Because if I'm a software developer, then no software gets developed unless I'm sitting in a chair developing software, right? On the other hand, if I run a software development business, then I have people who write software, and I can talk to my people and work on requirements and get the software written and occasionally put my butt in the chair. But I can also step away, and if I've got good people and a strong team, they can continue to develop software while I'm off skiing in Vail or what have you, right? So you can put a Band-Aid on it when you're in the same time zone as your client, right? Because you don't have to worry about things happening when you're in bed, because your client's in bed too. But once you're 12 time zones away, there aren't so many touch points, right? And so you have to start thinking about, well, when I'm not directly plugged in, how are things still happening? And the answer is that if all those things depend on your concentrated attention, they're not, right? And so it is you have no choice. You have no choice but to figure out how to get those things done at second hand, right? Either somebody else does them, or some automation does them, or in some fashion, you've created a machine composed of things or people, whatever, but a machine that accomplishes those tasks for you. So that's it's an odd sort of effect of having made the decision to come out and do this, is that it's driven the problem solving and actually taken whatever business I've had and made it a more effective business because I've had no choice. I've had no choice but to figure out how to make those things work because I just can't be awake 24 hours a day. Yeah.
Jason, I kind of like a hybrid idea between what you described and what Mak described. You know, one of the things, you know, being in the military and having moved as much as we've moved, we're kind of used to moving, even though we don't necessarily want to move quite as much. We're kind of used to it. And we know we'll probably start that itch, get a little stir crazy and want the flexibility to, okay, I want to move here now. And, you know, my business should hopefully be able to then translate with me, whether I'm now changing time zones and I'm gonna have to adjust those schedules. But then however I set that model up, I can take advantage of kind of the fun stuff, the waterfalls and the backpacking and all that stuff, but then also still manage the business and get to, you know, immerse myself in a new location, a new culture, a new whatever, kind of in between all those moments of, you know, working and having the time that I set aside for the business stuff to kind of keep that going consistently, but also kind of having the best of both worlds, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And you totally can. And you know, you're very quotable, Brianna. One of the thing that you said that I think is really the key to the whole thing is however you set that model up, right? So it's really easy, you know, when you're down the street from your client or your office, it's really easy to sort of to allow your business to happen, right? You know, many of the things that your business does and many of the you know, sort of the way you organize your time happens sort of by accident or by default. And so if I can sort of take a liberty with what I heard you say, what you're talking about is operating your business on purpose instead of by accident, right? Having a model instead of having a response, you know, and that's really key. And you know, maybe I've got, you know, as a software guy, you know, we do a lot of business analysis and we draw pictures and diagrams and models and stuff. So maybe that puts me in a bit of an advantage with respect to this thing. But I strongly believe that that business by design is preferable, and that the way to achieve business by design is to sit down and design your business, right? And you know what that can mean different things in different contexts. I draw pictures, you know, other people do it differently. But at the end of the day, you know, it's more than just a spreadsheet. It's actually figuring out, all right, well, what actually has to be done? Like, what are the things that need to be accomplished in order for me to like get somebody to pay me? And let's break this down into steps. And okay, well, which one of these do I actually have to do? Which one of these have to be done first? Which one of these have to be done at all? Right? And how can I group these things and assign them to somebody who can do them for me? Right? I mean, it's basic business design, but you know, when you're sitting in Milwaukee, you know, you can often sort of wave your hand at that, and you know, it just sort of happens. When you're sitting in Sri Lanka, and you only get, you know, 20 minutes a day to connect with the people who are, you know, who have to make this stuff happen, having a system is a huge advantage. And oh, by the way, I don't know, there's a book, it just escaped me now. There's and Mak, you're a big business book reader. You might, this might ring a bell for you. It's a story of a guy who learned to design his business in order to be sold, right? And the idea was that even if you never plan to sell your business, if you organize your business in such a fashion that it's of high value to a prospective purchaser, along the way, what you've done is you've created a better business, right? You've actually created something with more value, right? And much of that involves taking yourself out of the loop. It involves figuring out how you can get your business to operate without you having to pay attention to it 24/7. So I didn't mean for this to become a sort of a, that's the one right there, built to sell. Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, you already said it.
That's true. Yeah, I actually spoke to sell it. Yeah, built to sell. Right. I strongly recommend that for anybody who hasn't read it. And the concept is super solid and actually applies directly to this case, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be an artisan in your garage who's making that perfect thing and has to be there for every bit of it, right? Because, you know, when your client's 12,000 miles away, that's just not going to work. You want to have something that is going to be able to generate some revenue without your immediate constant attention. And built to sell is actually, that's a fantastic model. It's a great way to think about whatever your business is, how to organize your business in a way that it does that. So I strongly recommend that. All right, just to kind of set expectations here, we've got about 15 minutes. There are any number of other topics I can touch on, but maybe is there any particular point of interest that's worth poking at here?
I had a question for Brianna. Brianna, what type of acquisitions are you in specifically? All or specific niche?
It's primarily construction, facility management services, utility services is the majority of my experience. Though with the extensive training that we received just in general in acquisition, you know, it's easily spread to kind of the broad spectrum of supply and you know, pretty much anything you want to do government contract wise. I got an opportunity to spend 1 year on an exchange with industry where I went and worked for a large architect and engineering firm out of Denver. And it was a great opportunity. And I think just because of the ethical ties, you know, I couldn't do anything Navy related with them. So I did a lot of focusing on USAID type work, a lot of Department of Energy work, and helping them review proposals, interview people. And so, you know, I really got exposed to the broad spectrum that the training I have kind of helps contribute to.
So the reason I ask is I'm a commercial insurance broker. So I focus on high-risk industry, the energy industry, oil and gas, drilling, contractors, stuff like that, construction services. I mean, construction can range anywhere from interior retrofits, which is relatively low risk, internal, to scaffolding, crane and rigging operations, right? But my recommendation to you, if you do and you are passionate about what you do, would be to just pick up the phone and start calling some of these small time $20 to $50 million construction agencies that have a regional playing ground, if you will, and ask them if they'd be interested in pursuing government contracts, and just have a couple of government contracts in mind. Like, this is what you guys do. This is a project that's out there, and it pays quite a bit better than what you're used to getting paid in Des Moines, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, the government contracting, from what I can tell, is quite a bit different. The way that they bid those projects is quite a bit different.
Yes.
But if they already have the structure and bones of an organization that can perform those services, it certainly is a massive stepping stone in the right direction that a lot of these guys just are super intimidated by.
Yeah, and it's, you know, the way that the government looks at contracts compared to the way that the commercial industry looks at contracts is very different. And so, you know, a lot of the proposals that we see where they're, you know, a lot of like the commercial agents are trying to sell themselves, it's great, but that's not how they're going to get graded by the government. And so I think, you know, one of the things that I was hoping to focus is helping them understand, you know, what is the government actually looking for? What are the key points that you need to pay attention to when you're trying to bid on the work? Because that's where we saw a lot of problems. And no, I really like your suggestion. I'm taking my notes over here.
So Brianna, you know, one of the things that I think an advantage that you're going to have, you know, within the context of remote work and, you know, the digital nomadry, is a strong process, right? So at the end of the day, if you're looking for something that you can do without having to be in a room with people, right? One of the sort of solid categories is, well, I've got a process and I'm going to help you execute a process, right? You can represent your process with, with pictures and to-do lists and whatnot. You don't have to physically take somebody by hand and lead them through it, right? So, so I think that's a great example. And Mac, to your point, picking up the phone and like that whole, it's not just the process of achieving a government a contract. It's also the process of making that sale, right? If that's a process that can be systematized, right, then it's one that can be executed from someplace other than, what'd you say, Des Moines, right? So as a business model, perfect, right? Perfect to the extent that you can get it done, without having to go into a room with people. And really the good news, and this is one of the huge sort of advantages coming out of the COVID crisis, is that people's expectations have really shifted, right? I think at this point, for the first time in ever, many people who are going to do a $50 million contract with you amazingly don't expect to meet you in person first anymore, which is just astonishing but true, right? We got a new joiner here. Bob Adams was our speaker at a meetup a couple of weeks ago, and he had something going on tonight. But it looks like he's caught up with us just for the end of this. Bob, you want to give us a couple of minutes and introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I apologize for coming in late. I was doing
no worries.
A wonderful webinar with some Navy SEAL candidates, getting them ready to go to Navy SEAL training, and that got talking about leadership and management issues that they're going to deal with. But I'm a ex-Naval Academy retired Army doctor, sort of interesting combination. Was a Navy SEAL in the Navy for 18 years there, and then 18 years in the Army Medical Corps. But I was intrigued by your topic today because I retired from my private practice 3 months ago, sold my building and everything, and he said, "Oh, okay, I'm done, but I'm bored." So the world that doctors live in now, we need more telemedicine. So I'm looking at finding a company to start doing telemedicine so I can continue to do doctor stuff from the beach in the Turks and Caicos, and I'll go just turn on my computer and see patients. And I'm actually going through the process of trying to decide whether I'll affiliate with one of the many companies that are doing telemedicine or just do it myself. Heck, I've always been happier when I'm the boss. And I may just set up my own little computer network and log on when I want, see patients when I want. I haven't decided yet, but either way, I can do what I do on a computer without my stethoscope, 85% of the time.
Bob, that's really interesting to me. We've spent a fair amount of time here today talking about kind of what have we seen out here, right? Like what are the different sorts of business models that we've seen? And I can't think of, in all the sort of co-working places and whatnot that I've been in, I can't remember having met a doctor out here doing telemedicine, and it may just be because we're 12 time zones away, right? So it would be difficult for it'd be difficult to see patients during patient hours in the States from here. But I can't think of a single reason why that couldn't be done. I mean, really, I guess all you need is a sufficiently high bandwidth connection that you can get a good video, right?
So yeah, and the reason you haven't seen it before now is that it was not reimbursed by Medicare or Medicaid or the federal government. If we did it for free or we did it for cash payment. But the COVID crisis created a requirement for doctors to be able to see patients remotely. And the government in its wisdom said, we better pay for that or doctors aren't going to do it. And so effective just a couple months ago, the federal government enacted a rule that said, we're paying them for an office visit, whether it's in person or by telemedicine. Big deal. It's a big deal. We think it will continue into the future. There's no guarantees, but that's the reason. But I guarantee you, everybody on this visit today will be seeing a patient by telemedicine in the very near future.
I would almost say having a different time zone might actually be to a benefit, because how many times do you have to try to schedule a doctor's appointment, and then you have to try to miss work, and there's the travel time and all this stuff. Whereas if you're operating out of a different time zone, now it's easier for you to meet me in my evening or my weekend, or, something like that. Or your hours are much more flexible, and my time is much more flexible for work or family or whatever. I think that's a great idea.
No, and I'm attached to the University of North Carolina system. My clinic, I gave it to the university system. Every single clinic in our system has the built-in ability for you, Brianna, to go into your computer, pick your time slot, click it. I'll be there when you're there. It's a brilliant solution.
That's awesome. I had to do a phone appointment because the Navy base here, the clinics weren't allowing anybody to come in unless you were like dying. Just needed to get like a prescription renewal, and they're like, well, we'll do it over the phone. And they're like, we'll call you. And here I'm waiting for this time. And I'm like messaging them, is anybody going to call me? Like, what's going on? But, I think that's great that you can do some of that stuff where you don't really have to see the person physically in order to do, some of that administrative medical stuff. That's great.
No doctor showed up at all.
What's that?
Are you thinking about doing that someplace else or from your own region?
Yes and yes. The beauty of telemedicine is I can do it anywhere my computer is. So if I'm here tomorrow's Wednesday, on a Wednesday, and I'm going, I don't have anything to do, log on, see patients till I'm, don't want to do it, and log off. And then when I go on my river cruise through Europe, which I'm scheduled in September from Switzerland to Paris, I'll log on with my computer and go, hey, I got time. Who wants to talk to a doctor? It's just a neat way of the future that's coming. It's already here.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, let's see here. It looks like we're down to about our last 2 minutes. I'd like very much. Look, this Bull Session thing is, it's a new format for us, and so we've got a number of different topics out there. I think we have a lineup of an additional 5 topics after this one coming up, and so for each one, we're gonna do the session, and then the question is going to be, well, do we do this again? And so the question mark to answer there is there more to talk about, right? So I'd appreciate in the next minute or so to hear from you guys. What sorts of questions has this conversation brought up in your minds? What do you think is worth addressing next time around, sort of within this ballpark? Could I hear from any of you on that?
I think kind of the halfway mark. How do you enable mobile freedom and work at the same time? Maybe not something as drastic as a 12-hour time difference, but for me personally, again, I keep bringing this back around to me personally, but commercial insurance broker, I could write anything anywhere. As a matter of fact, I'm talking to Jason over at Trustway, who I met through the RINGKNOCKERs group. He's in Houston tomorrow. I mean, this is a very real reality. It's 2010. I mean, we're talking to 9 people from across the entire world right now. I don't know. What does the in between look like? As far as doing business at a national level versus doing business at a local or regional level. There aren't an incredible amount of sales folks on here right now, but I think, everyone that's on this call has been in a sales role of some shape, form, or fashion where they're trying to work with or, get someone to buy something. And I think that's probably where it's most applicable as a consultant, as a salesperson, as a freelance writer. At the end of the day, you're trying to get someone with money to buy what you have, and whether that's a capability, a product, or whatever. How can you take your skill set to a national level and function from anywhere?
That's a good question. And maybe sort of, this may or may not be sort of on your radar, but one of the things that has been a point of learning for me is sort of the nitty gritty technical how-to, like really like how do you actually, set up your systems in order to, have reliable connections and coverage and make sure that you've got, the right spares of the right things and all that kind of thing. So Tech Talk might be in there as well. All right, well, guys, thank you for participating in this experiment. We got a few more topics lined up, and we're gonna try it again next week and see what kind of traction we get. Where have we already got traction? That would be the RINGKNOCKER virtual meetups that happen every Thursday night Eastern time at 8 o'clock. If you haven't been to one yet, Brianna and the gyms, please join us. Those are a lot of fun, and it's a much larger group of people. So we're talking typically, 40 to 50 people on the line, and probably classmates. We'll send out notices when they're scheduled to come. So again, thank you for this, and hope everybody has a great week. And for you RINGKNOCKERs who are going to show up, we'll see you Thursday night.